from which I come.
But, well, I get that's important, and I understand that. But on the other hand, when we're looking at the very specific things that are happening in our world today, we have to deal with facts. Now,
I agree.
Like in terms of the Kennedy assassination, you contend that Cardinal Spellman of New York, and I have no special brief for Cardinal Spellman, you say that he was a mastermind of the Kennedy assassination.
That's correct.
You say that he was a Knight of Malta, and you also say that Clay Shaw in New Orleans, who's very well known from JFK's film, or from the JFK film, you say that he was a Knight of Malta.
Yes, sir.
I have looked up. I have checked the Joan Mellon. She's been a guest on Greg's show. Very good interview, by the way, Greg.
Oh, thank you.
Joan Mellon. She has in her book, which is an authoritative book on the Clay Shaw affair. I could not find a single reference to Clay Shaw being a Knight of Malta. I checked Paris Flamand's first landmark work on the subject, the Kennedy conspiracy. I could find no reference to.
Well, I may be able to help here, and I will send you both an email from Joe in California, who is collecting information for me regarding the Knights of Malta, and he sent me a list of about 50 people. Clay Shaw's name was on it, so you can ask him where he got it.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. I did some Internet research the other day, and the only references I could find to Clay Shaw being a Knight of Malta have been people reflecting upon what Eric wrote in his book. Another authoritative author on the Clay Shaw connection is James D. Eugenio, and I have some criticisms of him, but in his book, the title of which escapes me, I think it's a very similar title to Joan Mellon's book. In his book on the Clay Shaw affair, he has absolutely no references to Mr. Shaw being a member of the Knight of Malta. Now, we talk about John McCone being a member of the Knight of Malta. I'm pretty sure that's correct. There's only one problem in the context of Mr. Phelps' thesis in his book, Vatican Assassins, and that is this, that what he does not mention is the fact that John McCone was a very, very, very close friend of the Kennedy family. He was put in charge of the CIA precisely because the Kennedys wanted their own man in charge of the CIA. And what makes it all the more interesting is the fact that when McCone was placed in charge of the CIA, the Kennedys conducted their intelligence operations against Israel and the spying on Israeli nuclear weapons through John McCone's office and kept it out of the hands of James Angleton. So to suggest that John McCone, a Knight of Malta, and a friend of the Kennedy family, was collaborating with James Angleton, who was an Israeli loyalist, to say that they were working together against the Kennedy family just doesn't stand. They were on two opposite sides of the Israeli question vis-a-vis the nuclear bomb and U.S. support for Israel, to the point that even Mr. McCone, prior to the time he became CIA director, was head of the Atomic Energy Commission here in the United States.
Yes, he was.
And it was Mr. McCone who leaked the word that Israel was building a nuclear bomb. So the very suggestion that the Knights of Malta were behind the Kennedy assassination falls. It falls flat. The facts refute that.
Okay, we're going to be back. I have to take a break. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Right, we're back on the Investigative Journal, and I applaud both my guests, Michael for taking his research and looking into the Zionists, and Eric Phelps, of course, for taking his research and looking into the Jesuits. It's as if I got a picture in my mind, this road that comes to this fork, and one going left, one going right, and then, did they ever meet anywhere? I guess my question, I want to ask, let me ask Eric first. I always ask Michael first, and then I'll ask Eric or Michael the same question, and it boils down to this: you're both researching the same thing. You both want to get at the same apple, so to speak. You find out different things. Now, do you think, Eric, that Michael's research into the Zionists is helpful, hurtful, and do you feel that he covers the Vatican enough in his research, or is just ignoring it?
Well, I think that a lot of his research is very helpful. It's helped me. The Zionist connection is extremely important, and where he takes it with regard to all these specific Masonic Jewish Zionists is very, very good. However, I do not feel that he deals with the Jesuit order really at all in the Vatican enough, especially in the light of certain facts like these. In 1993, Yossi Beilin and Shimon Peres were responsible in the heat of Oslo of secretly deeding the old city of Jerusalem, especially the Temple Mount, to the papacy. Now that's a very, very important fact to show that the Zionists who run Israel are working for the benefit of the papacy. Why in the world, if they would run the world, would they ever do such a thing as that? That's very important. So I feel that Michael would do well to consider the Jesuit history. On my CD I put out with 13 old books, it goes back to their history some 150 years prior to this time, and it's worthy of a reconsideration, especially when we see the Jesuits involved in the initial creation of Zionism with the Dreyfus Affair, and that the Rothschilds have been known as the keepers of the Vatican treasury for at least a century and a half to 2 centuries.
And I'm going to ask Michael the same question that I asked Eric, but just flip-flop it. Do you think his looking into the Vatican is helpful or hurtful? And do you feel that he has ignored the Zionist movement?
Well, I find that, all right, this requires a very careful answer. My problem with Eric's writing is that he attributes so many of the crimes or events or actions or financial interests of what he describes as the Jesuits, or to he says it like, say, he'll say the Jesuits control something or another, whether it's the Council on Foreign Relations or the Anti-Defamation League or the State of Israel, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. I read his entire book, The Vatican Assassins, in the edition. It has what I have it in front of me here, like 695 pages. And more often than not, I'm afraid there are so many errors, at least in the area regarding the Kennedy assassination, errors, a few of which I have refuted here today, that it leads me to question everything else he has written on the subject. I mean, I do know a little bit about the Kennedy assassination, and as I say, there are so many errors in what he has presented, blaming the Jesuits for the crime, that one could easily make the argument that if, in fact, the Jesuits were behind the JFK assassination, Mr. Phelps's book, Vatican Assassins, is really nothing more than a put-up job by the Jesuits as another one of their front black propaganda operations to convince people that, well, no, the Jesuits weren't involved, because there are so many arguments against it based upon the errors that appear in Mr. Phelps' book. So I think we have to consider that possibility. That there are just so many errors in the book in regard to the Kennedy assassination and it relies on sources that are biased. For example, he relies on Emanuel Josephson. Dr. Josephson was a Jewish fellow in New York who wrote all these books saying that it was really the Rockefellers who ran America through the Council on Foreign Relations, and very studiously ignored, for example, the fact that the Rothschild Empire and their American satellites were responsible for putting the Rockefellers in place. And Eustace Mullins, who's very familiar to many listeners on this network, has written very critically in his books about the disinformation put forth by Emanuel Josephson.
Let me just ask one question.
Eustace isn't a Jesuit.
If you could ask, since you brought it up, Mike, let me ask this question, and if I can't get to the answer from both of you, we'll just go in the next half hour. Then I have to take some calls if you guys don't mind. But the point is, you brought up, you said Eric's work might be a black op job done by the Jesuits.
I don't really believe that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here's the point. I want to ask both of you. I'll start out with Eric. Eric, and I never asked either of you this question, and I think the listeners should know. Both you guys write books. Has anybody, Eric, funded your book? Are you working for any organization that we don't know about? And if we looked hard, could we ever find any?
No, I don't work for any organization, and I work pretty much from hand to mouth, week to week. But there's no organization that supports me openly.